If you're lying awake right now, struggling to quiet your mind, you're about to discover something remarkable. Tonight, we're traveling back 700 years to spend an entire day with a medieval peasant family. No stress about deadlines, no notifications, no rushing, just the gentle, predictable rhythm of life that helped our ancestors sleep peacefully every single night. In the next 2 hours, you'll follow William, a medieval peasant, through every moment of his day, from the quiet stirring before dawn to the peaceful settling into sleep by firelight. This story is specifically designed to help your mind release the tensions of modern life and drift into the kind of deep, restorative sleep that seems so elusive in our fast-paced world. By the way, if this helps you fall asleep tonight, make sure to subscribe to Past Bedtime. We create new historical sleep stories like this one regularly, and our community of thousands of insomniacs can tell you these stories work. Before we begin, take a moment to tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight and what time it is. Whether it's 2 a.m. in New York, midnight in London, or 3 a.m. in Sydney, you're part of our global community of fellow insomniacs finding peace through history. So adjust your pillow, close your eyes, and let yourself be transported to a time when life moved at the pace of the sunrise, when families gathered around a single fire, and when the end of each day brought the simple satisfaction of meaningful work completed. Now, let's begin our journey. Picture, if you will, the English countryside in the year 1350. It's a world painted in the soft colors of dawn, browns and golds and gentle greens, where the loudest sound is the wind through grain fields and the brightest light comes from the sun and the hearth fire. Here, in a small village whose name has been lost to time, lived families who understood something we've forgotten, the deep peace that comes from living in harmony with natural rhythms. Our story begins in a cottage so small and simple that your modern closet might be larger. The walls are timber and clay, darkened with age and smoke from countless fires. The roof is golden thatch, carefully laid and maintained through seasons of rain and snow. The single room holds everything a family needs to live, work, and find contentment: a wooden table worn smooth by decades of use, a few simple stools, clay pots hanging from wooden pegs, and straw mattresses arranged around the central hearth. In the pre-dawn darkness, as the first pale light creeps through the one small window, William begins to stir. The window is tiny, perhaps 8 inches square, covered with oiled parchment that lets in light while keeping out the worst of the weather. Through this humble opening, the faintest suggestion of morning light filters into the cottage, touching William's weathered face and drawing him gradually from sleep. William is 43 years old, which makes him remarkably aged by medieval standards. His hands are maps of his life's work, calloused from decades of holding plow handles and scythe grips, scarred from countless small injuries, strong despite their wear. His back aches. It has ached for so long he cannot remember a morning without pain, but this is simply part of existence, as natural and unremarkable as breathing. He rises quietly from his straw mattress, each movement deliberate and careful to avoid waking Margaret, his wife of 25 years, or their 3 children who sleep peacefully in the corners of the room. The mattress rustles softly as he shifts his weight, the sound barely audible in the quiet cottage. His feet find the packed earth floor, and he pauses for a moment, listening to the gentle breathing of his family. Thomas, at 14, is becoming a man. His lanky frame stretches across his mattress, one arm flung over his face, the other reaching toward the dying embers as if seeking warmth even in sleep. His hair, the same dark brown as his father's, falls across his forehead in unruly waves. Soon he will be ready to take a wife and establish his own household, but for now he remains caught between childhood and adulthood. Mary, at 12, already possesses the skilled hands of a woman grown. Even in sleep, her fingers move slightly as if continuing the spinning motions that occupy so much of her waking hours. Her face has the serene expression of someone who knows her place and purpose in the world. Her hair is braided neatly even for sleep, a habit ingrained by her mother's teaching about maintaining order even in small things. Little Edward, just 8, still finds wonder in simple things. He sleeps with the complete abandon of childhood, one small hand clutching a wooden toy horse that his father carved during the long winter evenings. His breathing is deep and even, the picture of innocent rest untroubled by adult cares and responsibilities. The cottage is cold but not uncomfortably so. The thick walls and carefully maintained thatch provide good insulation, and the banked fire from the night before still radiates gentle warmth. The temperature inside is perhaps 50 degrees, cool enough to see one's breath, but warm enough for comfortable sleep under wool blankets. This is the natural rhythm of medieval life, where human activity follows cycles of warmth and cold, light and darkness. William moves slowly through the familiar darkness to the hearth that forms the heart of their home. The fire that burns here is more than a source of heat and light. It is the spiritual center of family life, the gathering place where meals are cooked and stories are told, where children learn and adults plan, where the family comes together at the end of each day. The banked fire from the night before still holds a few precious embers, glowing like tiny stars in the bed of ash. Fire is life in this world, and to let it die completely would mean a cold, difficult morning for the entire family. Starting a fire from scratch requires time, effort, and materials that cannot be wasted. The art of banking a fire, covering the coals with ash to preserve them through the night, is one of the fundamental skills of medieval household management. William kneels before the hearth with practiced reverence, his movements guided by decades of experience. From a basket kept carefully protected from moisture, he takes a handful of the finest tinder, dried grass, and small twigs prepared during the autumn months specifically for this purpose. He arranges this tinder carefully around the glowing embers, creating small nests that will catch fire easily when the coals are stirred to life. With a thin iron rod kept specifically for this purpose, he gently stirs the ashes, exposing the living coals beneath. The embers glow brighter as they meet the night air, pulsing like tiny heartbeats in the darkness. William leans close and blows gently, his breath providing just enough oxygen to coax the coals back to full life. The tinder catches with a small crackle and flames begin to dance once more in the hearth. This daily resurrection of flame from ash is performed in countless cottages across medieval England, a ritual as old as human civilization itself. There is something deeply satisfying about this simple act, the triumph of light over darkness, warmth over cold, life over the temporary death of night. It connects William to his ancestors and to all those who have ever known the joy of warmth after cold, light after darkness. The fire catches and grows, fed carefully with larger pieces of wood until it burns steadily and strong. Warmth begins to spread through the small space and shadows dance on the walls, bringing the cottage to life. The smoke rises through a simple hole in the roof. There is no proper chimney, just an opening covered with a piece of wood that can be adjusted according to wind and weather. Margaret stirs as the firelight dances across the walls. She has been married to William for 25 years, and in all that time they have shared this morning ritual thousands of times. She knows without looking that her husband is tending the fire, preparing for another day of labor that will sustain their family. Without words, for they have shared this routine so many times that communication has become almost telepathic, she rises from their shared mattress and moves to begin her own morning tasks. She goes first to the wooden chest that holds their few precious possessions. The chest is old, perhaps handed down from her grandmother, made of oak and bound with iron strips that have rusted to a warm brown. Inside, wrapped carefully in cloth, are the materials she needs for the morning meal: grain for porridge, a precious pinch of salt, herbs dried from last summer's garden. She retrieves a handful of grain, barley mostly, with some oats mixed in. This will become their morning pottage, a thick porridge that provides sustained energy for the day's labor. The grain is good quality, free from mold and pests, carefully stored through the winter months in sealed containers that protect it from moisture and vermin. Each handful represents not just food, but security, the knowledge that careful planning and hard work have provided for the family's needs. Margaret fills an iron pot with water from the wooden bucket that sits near the door. The bucket is large and heavy, holding perhaps 3 gallons when full. Thomas carried this water from the village well the evening before, as he does every evening, walking the half-mile to the common well and back with the heavy bucket balanced carefully to avoid spilling a single precious drop. Water, like fire, cannot be taken for granted here. There are no pipes, no taps, no endless supply at the turn of a handle. Every drop must be carried by hand, every use must be considered and planned. The water is good, the village well is deep and pure, drawing from an underground spring that has provided clean water for generations. But the labor of carrying it makes every drop valuable, and waste is unthinkable. The iron pot is one of the family's most valuable possessions. Iron is expensive and difficult to obtain, and a good pot like this one represents a significant investment. It has been carefully maintained for years, seasoned with animal fat to prevent rust, scrubbed clean after every use. The bottom is blackened from countless fires, but the metal remains sound and strong. Margaret hangs the pot over the fire using a simple iron hook suspended from a wooden beam. The beam is scorched and blackened from years of use, but it remains solid and functional. As the water begins to heat, she adds the grain slowly, stirring constantly with a wooden spoon to prevent lumps from forming. The stirring motion is hypnotic, meditative, a gentle rhythm that helps ease the transition from sleep to wakefulness. As the pottage begins to thicken, Margaret adds a pinch of salt and a few herbs from her carefully hoarded supply. Salt is precious beyond measure. It must be obtained through trade from distant coastal regions, and it costs more than many families can afford. The herbs, dried parsley, sage, and thyme from her own garden add flavor and nutrition to the simple meal while connecting the family to the abundance of the growing season. The children begin to wake naturally as the sounds and smells of morning preparation fill the cottage. There are no alarms or artificial schedules here. The family rises with the sun and sleeps with darkness, following rhythms that have governed human life since the beginning of time. The waking process is gradual and peaceful, a gentle transition from dreams to consciousness that honors the body's natural patterns. Thomas is the first to stir, his young man's body already attuned to the demands of adult labor. He stretches carefully, working out the stiffness that comes from sleeping on a straw mattress, then sits up and runs his hands through his dark hair. His movements are becoming more like his father's each day, deliberate, economical, focused on the tasks that lie ahead. Mary wakes next, her movements graceful and purposeful. She sits up and immediately begins braiding her long hair, a task so automatic that she can perform it while still half asleep. Her fingers move with practiced skill, creating neat plaits that will keep her hair out of her face during the day's work. This small ritual of grooming is one of the few purely feminine activities in her day. Young Edward is the last to wake, blinking sleepily in the firelight and looking around as if surprised to find himself in familiar surroundings. He yawns widely, stretches like a small cat, then scrambles to his feet with the boundless energy of childhood. Even upon waking, his eyes are bright with curiosity about the day ahead. The family gathers around their simple wooden table as Margaret serves the morning pottage into carved wooden bowls. The table is rough-hewn but substantial, made from a single oak plank that has been worn smooth by years of use. The bowls are simple but functional, carved from local wood and shaped by hands that understood the importance of making everyday objects both beautiful and practical. They eat slowly, without rush, talking quietly about the day ahead. There is no hurry here, no frantic schedule to meet. The day will unfold at its natural pace, governed by the position of the sun and the demands of necessary work rather than by artificial deadlines imposed from outside. This unhurried approach to time creates a sense of peace and centeredness that is increasingly rare in the modern world. William discusses his plans for the day. He needs to finish plowing the north field before the spring rains come. He can sense the change approaching in the very air around them, in the way the wind carries new scents, and the way the light falls differently through the cottage window. This ability to read natural signs is one of the most important skills a medieval farmer can possess, developed through decades of careful observation and experience. Thomas will help with the plowing, continuing his patient education in the art of reading soil and guiding oxen. Yesterday he struggled a bit with maintaining straight furrows, but his father remains patient and encouraging, knowing that mastery comes only through practice. The boy's enthusiasm more than makes up for his occasional lack of skill, and William sees in his son the promise of a capable and successful farmer. Margaret plans to work in her garden, the small plot behind the cottage where she grows the vegetables that help sustain the family through the winter months. The garden is her special domain, as surely as the fields belong to William, and she tends it with the same care and attention that a painter might give to a masterpiece. Every plant, every square foot of soil, every drop of water is carefully managed to produce the maximum possible yield. Mary will help in the garden and work at her spinning, transforming raw wool into thread with the patient skill that has been passed down through generations of women. The spinning wheel stands in the corner of the cottage, a complex piece of technology that represents one of the major innovations of medieval life. Before the spinning wheel, thread was made with simple drop spindles, a much slower and more laborious process. Edward will help where he can, but mostly he will learn, absorbing the 1,000 small lessons that will prepare him for adult life. His tasks are simple but important, carrying water to thirsty plants, collecting eggs from the chickens, helping to organize tools and materials. These small jobs teach him responsibility while gradually introducing him to the skills he will need when he is grown. As they finish their simple meal, the first light of true dawn begins to filter through cottage windows throughout the village. The sun is still below the horizon, but the sky is lightening from black to deep blue to pale gray, and the shapes of buildings and trees are becoming visible in the growing light. This is the most peaceful time of day, when the world is quiet and still, before the full bustle of daily activity begins. William rises from the table and moves to the corner where his tools wait, his most precious possessions, the implements upon which his family's survival depends. There is his plow, a marvel of medieval engineering that represents the culmination of centuries of agricultural development. It is not the simple scratch plow of earlier times, but a proper moldboard plow with an iron share that can cut through the heavy soil and a curved moldboard that turns the earth over, burying weeds and crop residue to create a clean, fertile seedbed. The plow is heavy, requiring the strength of 2 oxen to pull it, but it can accomplish in a day what would take a man with a simple digging stick weeks to achieve. William runs his hands over the wooden frame, checking for cracks or where that might cause problems in the field. He examines the iron share, ensuring it is still sharp enough to cut cleanly through roots and stones. This tool is his partner in the endless struggle to coax food from the earth, and he treats it with the respect and care it deserves. Beside the plow hang his other tools, a scythe for cutting grain, its long curved blade honed to razor sharpness, a sickle for more delicate harvesting work, a flail for threshing grain from stalks, a mattock for breaking up hard ground, and a dozen other implements, each designed for a specific task, each maintained with meticulous care. These tools represent not just utility, but tradition. Some have been in his family for generations, passed down from father to son along with the knowledge of how to use them properly. Thomas joins his father at the tool corner, and together they prepare for the day's plowing. The boy has been learning this work since he could barely walk, first by simply following his father to the fields, then by helping to guide the oxen, and now by beginning to handle the plow himself under William's careful supervision. It is hard work, requiring not just physical strength but skill, timing, and an intimate understanding of the land. This education has no formal curriculum or classroom, but it is thorough and practical in ways that few modern educational systems can match. Every lesson is immediately applicable, every skill directly relevant to survival and success. There are no abstract theories to memorize, no standardized tests to pass, only the constant, practical application of knowledge in real-world situations where mistakes have immediate and visible consequences. They load their tools onto a simple wooden cart and make their way out of the cottage into the cool morning air. The village is awakening around them, smoke rises from cottage chimneys, children emerge to help with early chores, and the various sounds of rural life begin to fill the air. A dog barks somewhere in the distance. Chickens cluck and scratch in the dirt yards around the cottages. From the direction of the manor house comes the sound of the manor bell, marking the time and calling the village to the beginning of another day. The walk to the field takes perhaps 15 minutes, following a well-worn path that has been traveled by countless feet over countless years. The path winds between hedgerows that mark the boundaries of different holdings, past the village pond where geese paddle lazily in the morning light, and through a small grove of oak trees that provides welcome shade in summer and a source of acorns for the village pigs in autumn. As they walk, William points out various signs that Thomas must learn to read. The way certain grasses grow indicates the moisture level of the soil beneath. The behavior of birds can predict changes in weather. The condition of hedgerow plants reveals the health of the surrounding land. This is education of the most practical kind, the accumulated wisdom of generations passed from father to son through observation and experience. They arrive at the field as the sun clears the horizon, painting the landscape in shades of gold and green. This is William's holding 3 acres of good land that he works under the ancient system that governs rural life. He does not own this land outright, but holds it from the lord of the manor in exchange for labor and various payments. It is a system that has endured for centuries, providing stability and security in a world where both are precious commodities. The field has been partially plowed already, but much work remains. The soil is heavy clay that holds moisture well but can be difficult to work when conditions are not right. William examines the earth carefully, picking up a handful and testing its texture between his fingers. Too wet and the plow will stick and clog, too dry and the soil will form hard clods that will not break down properly. But today the conditions are perfect. The soil is moist but not muddy, pliable but not sticky. Thomas helps his father hitch the oxen to the plow. These are not William's animals. He cannot afford to own oxen, but rather they belong to the manor and are made available to the village peasants according to a carefully maintained schedule. The oxen are patient, powerful beasts, bred and trained for this work over many generations. They stand calmly as the wooden yoke is fitted across their broad necks, their breath visible in the cool morning air, their massive strength held in calm readiness. William takes his position behind the plow, his hands gripping the handles with the familiarity of long practice. Thomas stands at the head of the lead ox, ready to guide the team along straight, even furrows. This is teamwork of the most basic kind, man and beast, father and son, working together to accomplish what none could achieve alone. The work begins slowly with William calling gentle commands to the oxen and Thomas encouraging them forward. The plow bites into the earth with a satisfying sound, turning over a clean furrow that catches the morning light. Behind them, the field is gradually transformed from stubby remnants of last year's crop into neat rows of fresh, dark soil ready for the new planting. The work is steady but not rushed. There is a rhythm to plowing that cannot be hurried, the measured pace of the oxen, the regular turning of the earth, the gradual progress across the field. William and Thomas settle into this rhythm, finding the meditative quality that comes from repetitive, purposeful labor. There is something deeply satisfying about this work, something that connects them to the fundamental act of preparing the earth for new life. As the morning progresses and the sun climbs higher in the sky, other peasants appear in neighboring fields, beginning their own daily labor. Greetings are called across the field boundaries, news is shared, plans are discussed. This is a community bound together by common purpose and mutual dependence where the success or failure of one affects all. The plowing continues steadily, furrow by furrow, row by row. The oxen work without complaint, their massive shoulders straining against the yoke, their hooves finding sure footing in the soft earth. They know this work as well as the humans do, and they settle into the rhythm with the patience that comes from years of repetitive labor. Thomas guides the team with growing confidence, his commands becoming more assured, his movements more economical. He is learning to read the animals' moods and responses, to anticipate their needs, to work with them rather than simply directing them. This partnership between human and animal is one of the fundamental relationships of agricultural life, and mastering it is essential for anyone who hopes to make a living from the land. The morning work proceeds with the steady rhythm of generations, each furrow bringing them closer to completing the field preparation that will make this year's crop possible. In this simple act of turning soil, we see the foundation of all human civilization, the patient, careful work that transforms wild land into productive fields that can sustain families and communities through the cycles of seasons and years. As the morning sun climbs higher in the sky, painting the countryside in warm golden light, the rhythm of medieval life continues its ancient dance. William and Thomas have found their pace with the plowing, the oxen moving steadily across the field while the moldboard turns the rich earth in perfect, even furrows. The work is demanding but meditative, connecting them to thousands of years of agricultural tradition. The soil continues to work beautifully under the plow. Each furrow turns over cleanly, revealing the dark, fertile earth beneath last year's stubble. The recent rains have provided exactly the right amount of moisture, enough to make the soil pliable and workable, but not so much that it becomes sticky and unmanageable. William reads these conditions with the practiced eye of someone who has worked this land for decades, and he knows that days like this are gifts to be treasured and used wisely. Thomas is gaining confidence with each passing furrow. His commands to the oxen are becoming more natural, his understanding of their responses more intuitive. The lead ox, Thunder, has begun to respond to the boy's voice with the same attention he gives to William's, recognizing the growing authority in Thomas's tone. This relationship between human and animal is fundamental to medieval agriculture, and watching it develop fills William with quiet pride. The boy is learning to feel through the plow handles when the blade is cutting properly, when it encounters rocks or roots that need to be avoided, when the soil conditions change subtly from one part of the field to another. This tactile knowledge cannot be taught through words alone, it must be developed through countless hours of hands-on experience, through the gradual accumulation of skills that eventually become second nature. As they work, William shares the wisdom accumulated through years of farming experience. He points out how the color of the turned soil indicates its fertility, how the ease with which the plow cuts through the earth reveals its moisture content, how the behavior of earthworms and other soil creatures reflects the health of the land. This informal education is far more valuable than any textbook could provide because it connects abstract knowledge to immediate, practical application. The morning air is filled with the sounds of productive labor, the rhythmic thud of oxen hooves, the slice of the plow through soil, the gentle commands and encouragements that keep the team moving steadily forward. From neighboring fields come similar sounds as other families pursue their own plowing, creating a symphony of agricultural activity that has echoed across this landscape for centuries. Meanwhile, back at the cottage, Margaret and Mary have begun their own morning's work in earnest. The small garden plot behind the cottage may seem insignificant compared to William's 3-acre field, but it represents an equally important part of the family's survival strategy. Here, in this carefully tended space, Margaret grows the vegetables that will provide essential nutrition and variety in their diet throughout the coming year. The garden beds are arranged with the precision of a master craftsman. Each row is perfectly straight, each plant spaced at exactly the right distance from its neighbors. This attention to detail is not mere aestheticism, it reflects Margaret's understanding that efficient use of space and resources can mean the difference between abundance and scarcity when winter comes. Margaret moves through the garden with practiced efficiency, her experienced eye immediately identifying tasks that need attention. Here, young cabbage plants that were started indoors during the late winter are ready to be transplanted to their permanent locations. The seedlings are strong and healthy with dark green leaves and sturdy stems that promise good growth in the months ahead. She prepares each planting hole carefully, adding compost made from kitchen scraps and animal manure that has been carefully composted over the winter months. This rich, dark material provides the nutrients that will feed the growing plants while also improving the structure and water-holding capacity of the soil. Nothing is wasted in this household. Every scrap of organic material is carefully saved and returned to the earth to maintain the fertility that sustains their lives. The transplanting process requires patience and skill. Each seedling must be removed from its temporary container without damaging the delicate root system, planted at exactly the right depth, and watered carefully to help it establish itself in its new location. Margaret works methodically, giving each plant the individual attention it needs while maintaining a steady pace that will allow her to complete the morning's work. Mary works beside her mother, learning not just the physical techniques of gardening but the deeper knowledge that distinguishes successful gardeners from those who merely go through the motions. She learns to recognize the subtle signs that indicate when plants need water, when they are suffering from poor soil conditions, when they are approaching readiness for harvest. This education takes place through constant observation and hands-on practice. Mary learns to judge soil moisture by its color and texture, to distinguish between healthy plants and those that may be developing problems, to identify the various insects and other creatures that can either help or harm garden crops. Each lesson is reinforced by immediate practical application, making the learning both memorable and useful. The garden work provides opportunities for mother and daughter to talk about many subjects while their hands remain busy with productive tasks. Margaret shares stories from her own childhood, describing how her mother and grandmother taught her these same skills. She talks about years when the garden produced exceptionally well and others when weather or pests created challenges that required creativity and persistence to overcome. These conversations serve multiple purposes beyond simple storytelling. They transmit practical knowledge about gardening techniques, preserve family history and traditions, and strengthen the bonds between generations. Mary learns not just how to grow vegetables, but why certain techniques work better than others, how to adapt to changing conditions, and how to find satisfaction in the patient work of nurturing life from seed to harvest. As the morning progresses, other women from the village stop by for brief visits. These informal social interactions are an important part of village life, providing opportunities to share news, exchange information, and maintain the networks of mutual support that bind the community together. The conversations range over many topics, practical matters like the best time to plant beans this year, social concerns like preparations for an upcoming wedding, economic issues like the price of various goods at recent market days. There is discussion of whose cow is giving the most milk, speculation about when the harvest will begin, concern about old Henrik's persistent cough, excitement about young Susan's upcoming marriage to the blacksmith's son. These everyday matters form the substance of village life, the shared concerns and celebrations that create a sense of community, belonging, and mutual interdependence. The informal communication network represented by these casual conversations serves as the village's primary means of spreading news and coordinating activities. Important decisions are often made through this process of discussion and gradual consensus building, as people share information and gradually develop agreement about courses of action that will benefit the entire community. Little Edward spends his morning moving between helping in the garden and exploring the fascinating world that surrounds the cottage. At 8 years old, his day is structured enough to teach responsibility and useful skills, but flexible enough to allow for the kind of free exploration that helps children develop understanding of their environment and their place within it. He begins by helping his mother and sister with simple garden tasks that are within his capabilities while also providing genuine assistance. He carries water to newly transplanted seedlings using a small wooden bucket that is sized perfectly for his 8-year-old arms. He collects small stones and pieces of debris that might interfere with plant growth, learning to distinguish between materials that belong in the garden and those that should be removed. His natural curiosity leads him to examine everything closely. He watches with fascination as earthworms work their way through the soil, learning without realizing it about the creatures that help maintain soil health. He observes the different ways that various plants grow, some spreading close to the ground, others reaching upward toward the sun, each adapted to its particular role in the garden ecosystem. The cottage yard provides endless opportunities for discovery and learning. The chickens that scratch and peck in their enclosed area offer lessons in animal behavior and the practical aspects of food production. Edward learns to recognize the signs that indicate when hens are ready to lay eggs, when they are content or disturbed, how their behavior changes with different weather conditions and times of day. He helps feed the chickens, scattering grain and kitchen scraps while observing how different birds respond to feeding opportunities. Some are bold and aggressive, pushing others aside to get choice pieces. Others are more cautious, waiting for their turn or finding overlooked morsels in corners and hidden places. These observations teach him about competition, hierarchy, and survival strategies in ways that are immediate and memorable. The family's few sheep provide another source of fascination and learning. Edward helps drive them to and from pasture, learning to read their behavior and respond appropriately to their needs. He discovers how sheep move as a group, following leaders and responding to potential threats with collective action. He learns which plants they prefer to eat, how much water they need, what signs might indicate illness or distress. This hands-on education in animal husbandry provides knowledge that will serve Edward throughout his life, whether he remains in agriculture or pursues other occupations. Understanding animals and their needs is fundamental to medieval life, where almost everyone depends directly or indirectly on livestock for food, clothing, transportation, and power. As the sun approaches its highest point in the sky, the morning's work in both field and garden begins to reach natural stopping points. William and Thomas have made excellent progress with the plowing, completing perhaps a third of the remaining work while maintaining the high standards that will ensure a good seedbed for this year's crop. The oxen are beginning to show signs of the morning's labor, but they remain willing and capable workers. William calls a halt to the plowing as the heat of the day begins to build. The oxen are led to a nearby stream where they can drink deeply and cool themselves in the gentle current. The massive animals wade into the water with obvious pleasure, lowering their great heads to drink while the cool water flows around their legs and bellies. Father and son also take advantage of this break to refresh themselves. They drink from the stream, cupping the clear, cold water in their hands and splashing it on their faces and necks to combat the increasing heat of the day. The water is clean and sweet, drawn from springs that rise in the hills above the village and flow down through countryside that has not yet known the pollution of later industrial ages. This break provides an opportunity for William and Thomas to assess the morning's progress and plan the afternoon's work. They discuss which sections of the field remain to be plowed, how the soil conditions are likely to change as the day progresses, what adjustments might be needed to maintain the quality of their work throughout the remaining hours of daylight. Thomas asks questions about everything: why certain techniques work better than others, how to judge when soil is ready for different operations, what signs indicate potential problems with crops or livestock. His curiosity seems endless, and William answers patiently, understanding that this informal education represents one of the most important investments he can make in his son's future. Back at the cottage, Margaret and Mary are also approaching a natural break in their morning's work. The garden tasks that needed immediate attention have been completed successfully, and it is time to turn their focus to the preparation of the day's main meal. This midday meal is the most substantial food of the day, designed to provide the sustained energy needed for the afternoon's labor. Margaret begins by building up the cooking fire, adding wood to create the steady heat needed for meal preparation. The fire management requires skill and attention. Too much fuel and the fire becomes wastefully hot and difficult to control. Too little and the cooking process becomes slow and inefficient. Margaret has developed an intuitive understanding of fire behavior through years of daily practice. The meal will center around bread, dark, dense loaves made from a mixture of grains that varies according to what is available and affordable. The bread is not the light, white product that modern people might expect, but a substantial, nutritious food that provides sustained energy and essential nutrients. The grain was ground at the village mill where William paid a portion of his harvest for the miller's services. Margaret cuts thick slices of bread with a knife that has been carefully maintained and sharpened. The blade is made of iron, a valuable metal that represents significant investment for a peasant family. The knife serves multiple purposes: cutting food, carving wood, various household tasks, and it is treated with the respect due to such a versatile and essential tool. The bread will be supplemented with other foods as they become available seasonally and as the family's circumstances permit. If their cow is giving well, there might be fresh cheese, a soft, white variety that provides protein and essential fats. If the chickens have been productive, boiled eggs might add richness and variety to the meal. From the garden come whatever vegetables are ready for harvest, perhaps some early greens or roots that have successfully overwintered. Ale accompanies the meal, as it does most meals throughout the medieval world. The ale is weak by modern standards, containing relatively little alcohol, but it is safer than water and more nourishing than water alone. Every member of the family, including the children, drinks ale with their meals as a matter of course. The ale is brewed by Margaret herself, using techniques and recipes handed down through generations of women. The brewing process is complex and requires considerable skill to produce consistently good results. Barley must be malted by allowing it to sprout and then drying it to stop the germination process. The malted grain is then mashed with hot water to extract the sugars. Hops are added for flavor and preservation, and yeast is introduced to begin the fermentation process that converts sugars to alcohol. The entire process takes weeks and requires careful attention to timing, temperature, and sanitation. As Margaret prepares the midday meal, Mary helps by organizing utensils and serving implements, learning through observation and practice the skills of household management that will serve her when she establishes her own family. She learns not just how to prepare food, but how to plan meals efficiently, how to coordinate different cooking tasks, how to make the most of available ingredients and fuel. The cottage begins to fill with the welcoming aromas of cooking food as Margaret tends to the meal preparation. The combination of wood smoke, fresh bread, and whatever vegetables or other foods are being prepared creates an atmosphere of warmth and comfort that speaks to the most basic human needs for nourishment and security. This is the scent of home, a family gathered together, of another day's successful progress toward survival and prosperity. As the meal nears completion, Margaret sends Mary to call the men in from the field. The girl walks along the familiar path to where her father and brother are working, enjoying the opportunity to stretch her legs and observe the progress they have made during the morning hours. The sight of the neat, even furrows stretching across the field fills her with pride in her family's skill and dedication. William and Thomas are pleased to receive the call to the midday meal. They secure their tools and lead the oxen to shade where the animals can rest during the heat of the day. The plow is cleaned and checked for any damage or wear that might have occurred during the morning's work. These habits of careful maintenance ensure that equipment remains in good condition and continues to perform reliably when needed. The walk back to the cottage is leisurely and pleasant, providing an opportunity for father and son to discuss the morning's work and to enjoy the peaceful beauty of the countryside at midday. The sun is warm on their backs, birds sing in the hedgerows, and the various sounds of village life create a comfortable background of human activity and community life. They wash their hands and faces thoroughly before entering the cottage, removing the dirt and sweat accumulated during the morning's labor. This attention to cleanliness reflects not just practical hygiene, but deeper values about respect for food, family, and the sacred nature of shared meals. The cold water is refreshing and helps mark the transition from outdoor labor to indoor family time. The family gathers once again around their simple wooden table as Margaret serves the midday meal. The food is simple but nourishing, carefully prepared and presented with the attention that reflects its importance in sustaining the family's health and energy. There is no waste, no excess, but also no shortage of the essential nutrition needed to support their active lives. The meal is eaten slowly and deliberately without the rush that characterizes so many modern eating experiences. This is a time for the family to come together, to share not just food but conversation, to reconnect after the morning's separate labors. The pace allows proper digestion while also providing a natural rest period that prepares bodies and minds for the afternoon's work ahead. The conversation during the meal covers many topics, always returning to the practical concerns that govern their daily lives. William describes the progress made in the field, expressing satisfaction with the morning's accomplishments and optimism about completing the plowing according to schedule. The soil continues to work well, the oxen are performing strongly, and the weather remains favorable for continuing the work. Thomas speaks with growing confidence about his developing skills, describing how he is learning to read the animals' responses and to work more effectively with them. He asks questions about techniques he has observed, seeking to understand not just how to perform various tasks but why certain approaches work better than others under different conditions. Margaret reports on the garden work and household tasks that have occupied her morning, discussing plans for the afternoon and the coming days. There are preservation projects that need attention, textile work that must be advanced, and various household maintenance tasks that require completion before the busiest season of the agricultural year arrives. Mary contributes her own observations about the garden and the various learning opportunities she has encountered during the morning's work. Her questions reveal a growing understanding of the complex factors that influence successful gardening, and her comments show the development of the judgment and skills that will serve her well throughout her life. Even young Edward participates in the conversation, describing his morning's discoveries and asking the kinds of questions that children ask when their world is still full of mysteries to be solved. His parents answer patiently, recognizing that his curiosity represents the foundation for the knowledge and understanding he will need as an adult. As the meal draws to a close, the family begins to prepare for the afternoon's activities. The midday break has provided necessary rest and nourishment, but it has also served as an opportunity for planning and coordination that helps ensure the afternoon's work proceeds efficiently and productively. This careful balance between labor and rest, between individual tasks and family cooperation, represents one of the fundamental rhythms that make medieval peasant life both sustainable and satisfying. After the midday meal, there is a brief period of natural rest that allows the food to settle and energy to be restored for the afternoon's labor. This is not formal leisure time in the modern sense, but rather a gentle slowing of pace that follows the natural rhythms of human energy and the cycles of the day. The family uses this time for quiet conversation, tool maintenance, and mental preparation for the work that lies ahead. William sits outside the cottage in whatever shade he can find, checking over his tools with the methodical attention that ensures they will perform reliably when needed. He examines the plowshare once more, running his thumb along the cutting edge to ensure it remains sharp and properly shaped. A dull or damaged share can turn a day of productive plowing into an exercise in frustration, and replacing or repairing such essential equipment represents both significant expense and lost working time. Thomas watches his father's careful inspection, learning through observation the habits of mind and practice that separate successful farmers from those who struggle with constant equipment problems. He begins to understand that the few minutes spent checking tools before each work session can prevent hours of difficulty later, and that this kind of preventive attention is one of the hallmarks of experienced craftsmen in any field. The oxen rest in the shade, their massive bodies relaxed as they chew their cud with the patient rhythm that characterizes these gentle giants. Their morning's work has been significant, but they show no signs of distress or excessive fatigue. These animals have been bred and trained for exactly this kind of labor, and their calm acceptance of the work demonstrates the successful partnership between human agriculture and animal power that forms the foundation of medieval farming. Margaret uses the rest period to advance her spinning, though at a more relaxed pace than the focused work sessions that characterize other parts of her day. The spinning wheel turns steadily as she transforms raw wool into the thread that will eventually become clothing and household textiles for her family. This work requires attention but not intense concentration, allowing her mind to wander while her hands continue their skilled labor. The wool she works with comes from their own small flock of sheep, animals that provide not only the raw material for textiles but also meat, milk for cheese-making, and leather for various purposes. The sheep represent a significant investment for the family, but they also provide security and self-sufficiency that money alone cannot buy. Margaret understands the value of these animals not just in economic terms, but as partners in the complex web of relationships that sustain rural life. Mary sits nearby with her own textile work, practicing the various skills that will serve her throughout her adult life. She may be working with a drop spindle, learning the basic techniques of thread production, or she might be engaged in simple weaving projects that teach her to transform thread into useful cloth. Each skill builds upon previous learning, creating a comprehensive education in textile production that few modern people could match. The textile work provides opportunities for mother and daughter to discuss many subjects while their hands remain busy with productive labor. Margaret shares wisdom accumulated over her 25 years of married life, how to manage household resources efficiently, how to plan for seasonal variations in food availability, how to maintain family health through proper nutrition and simple remedies. She tells stories of her own youth and early marriage, describing challenges she faced and how she learned to overcome them. She talks about the first years when everything seemed difficult and overwhelming, and how gradually experience and confidence developed through daily practice and the support of other women in the community. These stories provide both practical guidance and emotional support for Mary as she prepares for her own transition to adult responsibilities. Little Edward spends the rest period engaged in the kind of quiet play that helps children process and integrate their learning experiences. He may be playing with simple wooden toys that his father carved during winter evenings, acting out scenarios that mirror the adult work he observes daily. Through this play, he begins to understand the roles and relationships that structure his world. His games often involve miniature farming activities, pretending to plow fields with stick tools, caring for toy animals, organizing imaginary households. This play is not mere entertainment but a crucial part of his education, allowing him to experiment with adult roles and responsibilities in a safe, low-stakes environment where mistakes become learning opportunities rather than serious problems. As the afternoon heat reaches its peak, the family gradually resumes their various work activities. The transition from rest to labor is gentle and unhurried, reflecting the understanding that sustainable productivity requires balance between activity and recovery. This natural pacing helps prevent the exhaustion and burnout that can result from relentless, unvaried effort. William and Thomas return to the field where the patient oxen wait in whatever shade they can find. The animals rise willingly when called, showing no reluctance to resume their work despite the increasing heat of the day. Their calm cooperation reflects the good treatment they receive and the careful management that ensures they are never pushed beyond their capabilities. The afternoon plowing begins where the morning work ended, with the same attention to quality and precision that characterized the earlier session. If anything, the work proceeds more smoothly now as both humans and animals have settled into the rhythm of cooperation that makes agricultural labor both efficient and satisfying. The oxen respond to commands with minimal guidance, the plow cuts through the soil cleanly and evenly, and the furrows continue to build in neat, parallel lines across the field. The heat of the afternoon sun requires some adjustment in work patterns. William and Thomas take more frequent breaks, ensuring that both they and the oxen remain comfortable and productive. They work more slowly but steadily, understanding that consistency over time produces better results than brief periods of intense effort followed by exhaustion or equipment problems. During these breaks, they discuss many subjects beyond the immediate requirements of agricultural work. William shares stories from his own youth, describing lessons learned from his father and grandfather. He talks about different farming techniques and why certain approaches work better under various conditions. He describes years when weather created special challenges and how the community worked together to overcome difficulties. Thomas asks questions about everything, his curiosity apparently endless and his attention focused. He wants to understand not just how to perform various tasks, but why they are done in particular ways and what alternatives might be available under different circumstances. This kind of analytical thinking will serve him well as he develops his own farming skills and begins to make independent decisions about agricultural practices. The conversation ranges beyond purely practical matters to touch on family history, community relationships, and the larger world beyond their village. William describes his own father's experiences during particularly difficult years when poor harvests tested the entire community's resilience and resourcefulness. He talks about how neighbors helped each other during times of crisis and how individual families contributed to collective survival through cooperation and mutual support. These stories serve multiple educational purposes. They provide practical knowledge about how to deal with various challenges that may arise in agricultural life. They preserve family and community history, maintaining connections to the past that help people understand their place in ongoing social relationships. They also transmit values and attitudes that help young people develop character and judgment that will guide them throughout their lives. Meanwhile, back at the cottage, Margaret and Mary have turned their attention to food preservation activities that are essential for maintaining adequate nutrition throughout the year. The medieval household must constantly work to transform fresh, seasonal food into forms that can be stored safely for months without spoiling. This requires extensive knowledge of preservation techniques and careful attention to timing and proper procedures. Margaret checks on vegetables that are in various stages of the drying process. Onions hang in carefully braided strings from the cottage rafters, their papery outer layers protecting the bulbs from moisture and decay. The braiding technique not only provides secure storage but also allows air to circulate around each bulb, preventing the buildup of moisture that could lead to rot. Herbs spread on wooden racks are slowly losing their moisture while concentrating their flavors and medicinal properties. Margaret examines each herb carefully, turning pieces as needed to ensure even drying and removing any portions that show signs of mold or other problems. The dried herbs will provide flavoring for winter meals and materials for treating common illnesses throughout the coming year. Root vegetables stored in baskets lined with sand represent another preservation strategy suited to different types of food. Turnips, carrots, and parsnips can be kept fresh for months if stored in the right conditions, cool, dark, and with just enough moisture to prevent them from drying out completely. Margaret checks these stores regularly, removing any vegetables that show signs of decay before they can contaminate others. The preservation work requires considerable knowledge and skill to produce consistently good results. Each type of food requires specific treatment, and timing is often critical. Vegetables must be harvested at optimal ripeness, processed quickly to prevent spoilage, and stored under conditions that maintain quality while preventing the growth of harmful microorganisms. Mary works alongside her mother, learning these preservation techniques through hands-on experience and careful observation. She learns to recognize the signs that indicate when vegetables are ready for harvest and processing, how to prepare them properly for different types of storage, and how to maintain the proper conditions for long-term preservation. This knowledge represents one of the most important skills a medieval woman can possess. The ability to preserve food successfully can mean the difference between adequate nutrition and serious deficiency during the winter months when fresh food is scarce. A woman who lacks these skills may watch her family suffer from malnutrition despite adequate harvest season production. The preservation work also provides opportunities for the informal education that takes place through daily conversation and shared activity. As they work together, Margaret and Mary discuss many subjects: family plans, community news, practical household management, and the gradual transition that will eventually make Mary the mistress of her own household. Margaret describes the skills and knowledge that Mary will need to manage her own family successfully. She talks about the importance of careful planning and resource management, about the need to balance immediate needs with long-term security, about the satisfaction that comes from providing well for those who depend on you. These conversations help prepare Mary not just for the technical aspects of household management, but for the emotional and psychological challenges of adult responsibility. She learns about the importance of patience and persistence when dealing with problems, about the need for creativity and flexibility when circumstances change unexpectedly, about finding satisfaction in work that may sometimes seem routine or unrewarding. As the afternoon progresses, other women from the village continue their informal visits and conversations. These social interactions serve important functions beyond simple companionship. They provide opportunities to share practical knowledge about household management and food preservation, to coordinate community activities and mutual assistance, and to maintain the social networks that bind the village together. The conversation ranges over many topics relevant to women's concerns and responsibilities. There is discussion of the best techniques for preserving different types of vegetables, sharing of recipes and household remedies, coordination of activities like communal bread baking and textile work that benefit from cooperation among families. Social news also circulates through these networks: announcements of pregnancies and births, plans for upcoming marriages, concerns about illness or economic difficulties affecting community members. This information helps coordinate the informal systems of mutual support that provide security and assistance during times of need. The women also discuss broader community concerns that affect everyone's welfare. There may be plans for repairing common facilities like wells or bridges, coordination of activities related to religious festivals or seasonal celebrations, or discussion of problems that require collective action to resolve effectively. Little Edward continues his own form of afternoon activity, moving between helping with preservation work and exploring the various educational opportunities that surround him. His tasks are scaled to his 8-year-old capabilities while still providing genuine assistance and teaching responsibility and useful skills. He helps sort vegetables for preservation, learning to identify signs of quality and problems that might affect storage success. He assists with moving materials and organizing workspaces, developing the habits of orderliness and efficiency that will serve him throughout his life. Most importantly, he observes and gradually absorbs the knowledge and techniques that will form the foundation for his own adult competence. His natural curiosity leads him to ask countless questions about everything he observes. Why are some vegetables dried while others are stored fresh? How do you know when herbs are properly prepared for storage? What happens if preservation techniques are not performed correctly? His parents and sister answer patiently, understanding that this questioning represents the active learning process that will eventually make him a capable and knowledgeable adult. Edward's afternoon also includes time for the kind of free exploration that helps children develop understanding of their world. He may spend time observing the behavior of chickens, learning about their feeding patterns, social hierarchies, and responses to different situations. He watches the family's few sheep, beginning to understand their needs and behaviors. He explores the cottage yard and nearby areas, discovering plants, insects, and other creatures that populate his environment. This informal education provides Edward with practical knowledge about animals and natural systems that will be valuable regardless of what occupation he eventually pursues. Medieval life depends heavily on understanding and working with natural systems, and children who develop this understanding early have significant advantages throughout their lives. As the afternoon heat begins to moderate and the sun starts its descent toward the western horizon, the various work activities continue but gradually shift toward preparation for evening. In the field, William and Thomas maintain their steady progress with the plowing, bringing them closer to completing this essential preparation for the spring planting. The soil continues to work well under the plow, turning over in clean, even furrows that catch the afternoon light. The oxen have adapted to the heat and continue to work willingly, their massive strength seeming almost inexhaustible when properly managed and not pushed beyond reasonable limits. The partnership between human skill and animal power demonstrates one of the fundamental relationships that makes medieval agriculture both productive and sustainable. Thomas's confidence and competence continue to grow throughout the afternoon. His commands to the oxen become more natural and authoritative, his understanding of the work more intuitive and sophisticated. He begins to anticipate problems before they develop and to make small adjustments that improve the efficiency and quality of the work. William watches his son's progress with quiet satisfaction, recognizing the signs of developing mastery that indicate Thomas will soon be ready to take on full adult responsibilities. The boy's growing competence represents not just individual achievement but family security, since Thomas will eventually become the primary provider for his parents as they age beyond their capacity for heavy physical labor. The afternoon plowing session also provides opportunities for William to share more advanced knowledge and techniques with his increasingly capable son. He explains the subtle signs that indicate different soil conditions, the adjustments needed for working in various types of terrain, the planning and timing considerations that determine when different field operations should be performed. This advanced education prepares Thomas not just to follow established routines, but to make the independent judgments that successful farming requires. He learns to read weather patterns and anticipate changes that might affect field work. He develops understanding of soil management techniques that maintain and improve land productivity over time. He begins to grasp the complex timing and coordination required to manage multiple agricultural activities simultaneously. Back at the cottage, Margaret and Mary continue their preservation work while also beginning to think about the evening meal and the various household tasks that need completion before darkness falls. The medieval day follows natural rhythms of light and darkness, and families must organize their activities to make the most of available daylight while ensuring that essential tasks are completed before evening. The preservation work has made good progress during the afternoon session. Additional vegetables have been prepared for winter storage, herb supplies have been replenished and organized, and various other food preservation projects have been advanced according to schedule. This steady, consistent attention to preservation activities ensures that the family will have adequate nutrition throughout the year. Margaret begins to plan the evening meal, considering what ingredients are available and what cooking methods will make the best use of fuel and time. Medieval cooking requires considerable skill to produce varied and appealing meals using limited ingredients and simple cooking equipment. The single pot and few basic utensils available to most peasant families demand creativity and efficiency to produce satisfying results. The evening meal will likely center around bread and ale, supplemented with whatever vegetables are ready for harvest and any other foods that circumstances provide. If the family has been fortunate, there might be cheese from their cow or eggs from their chickens. From the garden may come fresh greens or other vegetables that add nutrition and flavor to the basic grain-based diet. Mary helps with meal planning and preparation while also continuing to learn the complex skills of household management that will serve her throughout her adult life. She learns not just how to prepare specific foods, but how to plan meals efficiently, how to coordinate different cooking tasks, how to make the most of available ingredients and cooking fuel. The meal preparation process provides additional opportunities for education and bonding between mother and daughter. Margaret shares techniques for enhancing simple ingredients, methods for stretching limited resources to feed the family adequately, and strategies for varying routine meals to maintain interest and appetite. As the afternoon progresses toward evening, the pace of work begins to shift subtly toward preparation for the transition from day to night. In the field, William makes decisions about when to end the day's plowing based on his assessment of remaining daylight, the condition of the oxen, and the progress made toward completing the overall task. The decision to end field work is made carefully, balancing the desire to accomplish as much as possible with the need to avoid overworking the animals or attempting to continue when decreasing light makes precision difficult. William's experience tells him when conditions are optimal for good work and when it is better to stop and resume the next day. The end of the plowing session follows the same careful procedures that characterized its beginning. The oxen are unharnessed and led to water, then turned out into pasture where they can graze and rest until tomorrow's work begins again. The plow and other tools are cleaned and checked for damage or excessive wear, then loaded onto the cart for transport back to the cottage. This attention to equipment maintenance reflects understanding that tools represent significant investment and that careful care extends their useful life while ensuring reliable performance. Medieval peasants cannot afford to replace equipment frequently, so maintenance and proper storage are essential aspects of successful farming. The walk back to the cottage is peaceful and reflective, providing opportunities for father and son to discuss the day's accomplishments and to plan for tomorrow's activities. The afternoon's work has brought them significantly closer to completing the field preparation, and both feel satisfaction with the progress made toward this year's planting. They discuss the remaining work needed to finish the plowing, the timing considerations that will determine when planting should begin, and the various other agricultural tasks that will demand attention in the coming weeks. This planning process helps ensure that all necessary activities are completed in proper sequence and within optimal timing windows. The conversation also ranges beyond immediate practical concerns to touch on family matters and community relationships. William and Thomas talk about Thomas's developing skills and growing readiness for adult responsibilities. They discuss plans for Thomas's eventual marriage and establishment of his own household, considering the various factors that will influence these important life transitions. As they approach the cottage, they can see smoke rising from the chimney and smell the welcoming aromas of cooking food. These signs of home and family provide deep satisfaction after a day of productive labor, representing the security and comfort that make hard work worthwhile. The sight of Margaret and Mary moving around the cottage, tending to evening preparations, reinforces the sense of family cooperation and shared purpose that sustains medieval peasant life. The afternoon's work draws to a close with the same sense of accomplishment and forward progress that characterizes each day's labor. Individual tasks have been completed successfully, family members have contributed according to their abilities and responsibilities, and the ongoing projects that sustain life have been advanced another step toward completion. This daily rhythm of purposeful work, family cooperation, and gradual progress towards seasonal goals represents one of the fundamental patterns that give meaning and structure to medieval peasant life. Each day builds upon previous days, each season prepares for the next, and each year contributes to the ongoing story of family and community survival and prosperity. As the sun begins its gentle descent toward the western horizon, painting the countryside in warm shades of gold and amber, the rhythm of medieval life shifts toward the peaceful activities that mark the transition from day to night. The long afternoon of productive labor has brought satisfaction and tangible progress, and now the family begins the gradual process of drawing together for the evening hours that will restore their energy and prepare them for tomorrow's tasks. William and Thomas make their final approach to the cottage, their cart loaded with the tools that have served them well throughout the day. The oxen have been tended to and turned out to pasture, where they can graze peacefully under the evening sky. The day's plowing has advanced significantly, bringing them closer to completing the field preparation that will make this year's planting possible. Both father and son feel the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work accomplished with skill and dedication. The cottage welcomes them with the warm glow of firelight through its small windows and the appetizing aromas of the evening meal that Margaret has been preparing. Smoke rises steadily from the roof opening, carrying with it the sense of cooking food and burning with that speak of home, security, and family gathered together at the end of another productive day. They store their tools carefully in the small shed attached to the cottage, each implement cleaned and placed in its proper location where it will remain dry and secure until needed again. This attention to tool care reflects the understanding that these implements represent both significant investment and essential resources for the family's survival and prosperity. William and Thomas wash themselves thoroughly at the water basin outside the cottage, removing the dirt and sweat accumulated during the long day of field work. The cold water is refreshing and helps mark the transition from outdoor labor to indoor family time. This simple ritual of cleansing serves both practical hygiene needs and symbolic purposes, signaling the shift from work to rest, from individual effort to communal gathering. Inside the cottage, Margaret and Mary have been busy with the final preparations for the evening meal. The single room is warm and welcoming, filled with the golden light of the fire and the gentle sounds of domestic activity. The wooden table has been cleared and cleaned, ready to receive the family for their evening gathering around food and conversation. The meal itself reflects the season and the family's circumstances, combining simple staples with whatever fresh foods are available from garden and livestock. There is bread, as always dark, substantial loaves that provide the foundation of their nutrition. Margaret has prepared a pottage similar to the morning's, but enhanced with vegetables from the garden and perhaps a bit of bacon if their preservation stores allow for such richness. The vegetables come fresh from the garden beds that Margaret and Mary have tended throughout the day. Early greens provide color and nutrition, while onions and herbs add flavor to what might otherwise be a plain meal. Each ingredient represents careful planning and patient work, from the initial soil preparation through planting, cultivation, and harvest. If the family has been particularly fortunate, there might be fresh cheese made from their cow's milk, eggs from chickens that have been productive, or even a bit of fresh meat if circumstances have permitted the slaughter of one of their small livestock. These additions transform a simple meal into something approaching abundance, reminding the family of the rewards that come from careful animal husbandry and resource management. Ale accompanies the meal, drawn from the supply that Margaret brewed during the quieter winter months. The brewing process represents one of the most complex and important skills that medieval women possess, requiring knowledge of fermentation, timing, and the proper balance of ingredients to produce a beverage that is both safe and nourishing. The family gathers around their table as the last light of day fades from the sky outside. The cottage is illuminated now by firelight and perhaps a single tallow candle, creating an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy that draws them together after the day's separate labors. This is one of the most important times of day, when the family comes together to share not just food but conversation, planning, and the simple pleasure of each other's company. The evening meal proceeds at an unhurried pace, with conversation flowing naturally over many topics. William and Thomas describe the day's progress in the field, expressing satisfaction with the work accomplished and optimism about completing the plowing according to schedule. The soil continues to work well, the oxen remain in good condition, and the weather shows every sign of remaining favorable for the continuation of field work. Thomas speaks with growing confidence about his developing skills and understanding. He describes how he is learning to read the subtle signs that indicate soil conditions, how he is becoming more adept at working with the oxen, how he is beginning to understand the complex timing and planning that successful farming requires. His enthusiasm and evident competence fill William with quiet pride and confidence in the family's future. Margaret and Mary report on their own activities, describing the garden work and food preservation tasks that have occupied their day. The transplanting has been completed successfully, with young plants showing good signs of establishment in their new locations. Preservation work has advanced according to plan, ensuring that the family will have adequate stored food to supplement fresh production throughout the coming year. The conversation ranges beyond immediate practical concerns to touch on community matters and family relationships. There is news from neighbors and friends, discussion of upcoming events and seasonal celebrations, planning for longer-term projects and goals. These discussions help maintain the social connections that bind the community together while also strengthening the bonds between family members. Edward contributes to the conversation in his own 8-year-old way, describing the day's discoveries and asking the kinds of questions that children ask when their world is still full of mysteries to be explored and understood. His parents and siblings answer patiently, seeing in his curiosity the foundation for the knowledge and skills he will need as he grows toward adulthood. The boy talks excitedly about the various animals he has observed throughout the day, how the chickens behave differently at different times, what the sheep do when they think no one is watching, how the oxen seem to understand exactly what is expected of them during field work. These observations reveal a developing understanding of the relationships between humans and animals that form such an important part of medieval agricultural life. His questions often touch on the fundamental aspects of farming and household management that adults take for granted. Why do plants need water? How do you know when soil is ready for planting? Why do some animals live in the cottage while others stay outside? These innocent inquiries often lead to discussions that help everyone in the family think more deeply about the work they do and the world they inhabit. As the meal draws toward its conclusion, the family begins to transition toward the evening activities that will occupy the remaining hours before sleep. These activities serve multiple purposes. They provide productive occupation for hands and minds, they advance various household projects that require sustained attention over time, and they create opportunities for education, conversation, and family bonding. William often spends evening hours working on tool maintenance and repair projects that are difficult to accomplish during busy daylight hours. This work requires good light and sustained attention, making the fireside an ideal location for tasks like sharpening blades, replacing worn handles, and making small adjustments that keep equipment functioning properly. Tonight he examines his scythe, the long-handled tool that will be essential for the grain harvest still months away. The blade must be kept perfectly sharp to cut grain stalks cleanly and efficiently, and the handle must be strong and properly fitted to withstand the stress of repeated use during the demanding harvest season. The scythe blade is made of steel, a material that represents considerable expense and sophisticated metalworking technology. William has learned through years of experience how to maintain this blade properly, using whetstones to keep the cutting edge sharp and techniques passed down through generations to prevent rust and other damage that could ruin such a valuable tool. Thomas works alongside his father, learning the subtle skills of tool maintenance that will serve him throughout his life. He learns to recognize the signs that indicate when blades need sharpening, how to use whetstones properly to achieve the right edge angle, how to identify and repair problems before they become serious enough to affect the tool's performance. This evening work session provides opportunities for quiet conversation between father and son, away from the bustle of daily field work and family obligations. William shares stories from his own youth, describing lessons learned from his father and grandfather about farming techniques, tool care, and the attitudes and approaches that lead to success in agricultural life. These conversations cover many subjects beyond purely technical matters. William talks about the importance of patience and persistence in farming, how weather and other factors beyond human control require flexibility and adaptability, how the relationships between families in the community provide security and support during difficult times. Thomas asks questions about everything, his curiosity apparently inexhaustible and his attention focused on understanding not just how to perform various tasks but why they are done in particular ways. He wants to understand the reasoning behind different techniques, the trade-offs involved in various approaches, and the kinds of judgment and decision-making that successful farming requires. Meanwhile, Margaret continues her spinning by the firelight, though the pace is more relaxed now and the work is interspersed with conversation and rest. The spinning wheel turns steadily, its gentle rhythm adding to the peaceful atmosphere of the cottage. This work advances the never-ending project of producing thread for the family's textile needs while also providing a calming, meditative activity for the evening hours. The spinning process itself is remarkably complex, requiring coordination between hands and feet to control the wheel's speed while drawing out wool fibers and twisting them into consistent thread. Margaret has developed this skill over decades of practice, and her movements are now so automatic that she can carry on conversations, supervise other activities, and think about planning and organizing while her hands continue their productive work. Mary sits nearby with her own textile projects, which might include spinning with a drop spindle, simple weaving, or needlework that maintains and improves the family's clothing and household textiles. Each evening's work advances these projects incrementally, and over time the accumulated progress provides the family with the cloth, clothing, and household items they need. The needlework is particularly important for maintaining the family's limited wardrobe. Medieval clothing is expensive and must be maintained carefully to provide maximum service. The ability to repair tiers, adjust fit, and update styles according to changing needs is essential for families that cannot afford to purchase new garments regularly. Mary's needlework also provides opportunities for creativity and self-expression within the constraints of practical necessity. She learns to make functional repairs that are also aesthetically pleasing, to add decorative touches that personalize utilitarian objects, and to take pride in workmanship even when creating simple, everyday items. The evening textile work provides the perfect setting for the kind of informal education that takes place through conversation and shared activity. Margaret uses this time to share the accumulated wisdom of her 25 years of married life, describing the skills and knowledge that Mary will need to manage her own household successfully. She talks about the importance of careful planning and resource management, about balancing immediate needs with long-term security, about finding satisfaction in work that may sometimes seem routine but is essential for family welfare. She describes the challenges and rewards of raising children, managing a household economy, and maintaining the family relationships that provide meaning and purpose in daily life. These conversations help prepare Mary not just for the technical aspects of household management, but for the emotional and psychological demands of adult responsibility. She learns about the importance of patience and persistence when dealing with problems, about the need for creativity and flexibility when circumstances change unexpectedly, and about finding fulfillment in the service of others. Edward's evening activities reflect his age and stage of development, combining useful contributions to family work with the kind of play and exploration that support his continued learning and growth. He might help his mother by winding thread onto bobbins, a task that requires attention and coordination but is well within his capabilities. He also spends time with simple wooden toys that his father carved during previous winter evenings: a horse, a top, small figures that represent the people and animals of his world. Through play with these toys, Edward acts out scenarios that help him understand adult roles and relationships while also providing entertainment and creative expression. His games often mirror the adult work he observes daily. He pretends to plow fields with stick tools, to care for toy animals, to organize miniature households. This play serves important educational functions, allowing him to experiment with adult responsibilities in a safe environment where mistakes become learning opportunities rather than serious problems. Edward also participates in the evening conversations, listening to stories and asking questions that reveal his developing understanding of the world around him. The family's patient responses to his questions help build his vocabulary, his knowledge of practical matters, and his understanding of the values and attitudes that guide family and community life. As the evening progresses and the fire burns lower, the cottage gradually grows quieter and more peaceful. The various work projects continue, but at a more relaxed pace, and conversation becomes more intimate and reflective. This is the time when the family draws together most closely, sharing thoughts and feelings that might not emerge during the busy daylight hours. The transition toward sleep is gradual and natural, following rhythms that have governed human life since the beginning of time. There are no electric lights to extend the day artificially, no television or other electronic entertainment to stimulate minds already tired from physical labor. Instead, there is the gentle progression from activity to rest that honors the body's natural cycles and prepares mind and spirit for restorative sleep. But before the family settles for the night, there are still evening tasks to be completed and conversations to be shared. The dying light of day outside the cottage windows reminds them that another cycle of work and rest is drawing toward its close. But the warm glow of the firelight creates a peaceful sanctuary where the day's experiences can be processed and the bonds of family can be strengthened through quiet communion. The evening hours stretch ahead, offering opportunities for the kind of unhurried interaction that busy daylight hours seldom permit. This is when the deepest learning takes place, when wisdom is transmitted not through formal instruction but through the natural sharing that occurs when family members relax together in the security of home and hearth. As the last traces of daylight fade from the cottage windows and the world outside settles into the deep quiet of night, the family's evening together takes on an even more intimate and reflective character. The firelight creates a warm circle of golden illumination that seems to draw them closer together, creating a sense of sanctuary and peace that marks the transition from the active day to the restorative night. William continues his careful work on the scythe blade, but his movements have become more deliberate and meditative as the evening deepens. The repetitive motion of the whetstone against steel creates a gentle, rhythmic sound that adds to the peaceful atmosphere of the cottage. This work is both practical and contemplative, serving the dual purpose of maintaining essential equipment while providing the kind of focused, manual activity that helps the mind process the day's experiences and prepare for rest. Thomas watches his father's technique with careful attention, learning not just the physical skills of tool maintenance but the deeper lessons about patience, precision, and the importance of taking time to do things properly. The boy is beginning to understand that excellence in any endeavor requires this kind of sustained attention to detail, this willingness to invest time and care in activities that might seem routine but are actually fundamental to success. The conversation between father and son flows naturally from technical discussions of tool care to broader reflections on life, work, and the values that guide their family and community. William shares stories from his own youth, describing how his father taught him these same skills and how each generation passes knowledge and wisdom to the next through this kind of intimate, patient instruction. He tells Thomas about the summer when he was 14, the same age Thomas is now, and how his own father entrusted him with increasingly important responsibilities in the fields. William describes the pride and anxiety he felt when first allowed to guide the oxen independently, the mistakes he made and the lessons he learned, the gradual development of confidence and competence that marked his transition from boyhood to manhood. These stories serve multiple purposes in Thomas's education. They provide practical guidance about how to handle the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in his own development. They create emotional connection between father and son by revealing William's own experiences of uncertainty and growth. And they place Thomas's current learning within the larger context of family tradition and generational continuity. Thomas asks questions that reveal his developing maturity and his growing awareness of the responsibilities that await him. He wants to understand not just how to perform various farming tasks, but how to make the kinds of decisions that will determine his success as an independent adult. How do you know when to take risks and when to be cautious? How do you balance individual ambition with family and community obligations? How do you prepare for challenges that cannot be predicted or controlled? William answers these questions thoughtfully, drawing upon decades of experience while acknowledging that each person must ultimately find their own way through life's complexities. He emphasizes the importance of careful observation, patient learning, and the cultivation of judgment that comes only through sustained attention to the consequences of one's choices and actions. Meanwhile, Margaret and Mary continue their own evening work and conversation, which has gradually shifted from practical discussions of household management to more personal reflections on women's roles and relationships. Margaret shares insights gained through 25 years of marriage and motherhood, describing the satisfactions and challenges that have shaped her understanding of family life. She talks about the early years of her marriage when everything seemed overwhelming and she doubted her ability to manage the complex responsibilities of running a household and raising children. She describes how other women in the community provided guidance and support during difficult times and how gradually she developed the confidence and skills that now make these tasks seem routine and manageable. Margaret emphasizes to Mary the importance of developing strong relationships with other women in the community, both for practical support and for the kind of emotional sustenance that helps women navigate the challenges of medieval life. She explains how women create informal networks of mutual assistance that provide security during times of illness, economic difficulty, or family crisis. These networks serve multiple functions beyond simple crisis support. They provide opportunities for sharing knowledge about household management, child rearing, and the various skills that women need to maintain their family's welfare. They create social connections that enrich daily life and provide emotional fulfillment beyond the immediate family circle. And they preserve and transmit cultural traditions and values that bind the community together across generations. Mary listens carefully to these discussions, asking questions that reveal her growing understanding of the complex social relationships that structure women's lives in medieval society. She is beginning to appreciate that managing a household involves not just technical skills like cooking and textile production, but also social and emotional capabilities that allow women to build and maintain the relationships that provide security and meaning in their lives. The conversation between mother and daughter also touches on the more intimate aspects of women's experience, the physical and emotional challenges of pregnancy and childbirth, the joys and difficulties of raising children, the ways that women find personal fulfillment within the constraints of their social roles. Margaret speaks honestly about these matters, believing that Mary needs realistic understanding of what lies ahead in her own adult life. Young Edward continues to move between helping with various small tasks and pursuing his own quiet activities. His bedtime is approaching, but in medieval households, the transition to sleep is gradual rather than abrupt, allowing children to participate in family life until they naturally become tired enough to rest peacefully. He helps his mother by organizing wool fibers for tomorrow's spinning, a task that requires careful attention but is well within his capabilities. He also spends time playing quietly with his wooden toys, acting out scenarios that help him process and understand the adult activities he has observed throughout the day. Edward's games often involve miniature representations of farming and household activities. He might arrange small sticks to represent field furrows, use pebbles to represent livestock, or create tiny household scenes with scraps of cloth and wood. Through this play, he rehearses adult roles and responsibilities while also expressing his creativity and imagination. The adults encourage and participate in Edward's play when possible, understanding that this kind of imaginative activity is crucial for his development. They answer his questions patiently and sometimes suggest new elements for his games that help expand his understanding of the world around him. As the evening deepens, the family's activities gradually slow and the atmosphere becomes even more peaceful and reflective. The firelight creates dancing shadows on the cottage walls, and the sounds from outside become fewer and more distant as the village settles into sleep. This is the most magical time of day, when the boundary between wakefulness and dreams begins to blur and the mind naturally turns toward rest and renewal. William begins the process of banking the fire for the night, but he does so slowly and carefully, extending this peaceful time together for as long as possible. The fire banking is both a practical necessity and a symbolic ritual that marks the formal end of the day's activities and the beginning of the transition toward sleep. The technique of fire banking requires considerable skill and experience to perform properly. William uses a long iron poker to carefully arrange the burning coals into a compact pile, then covers them with a precise amount of ash that will preserve them through the night while preventing dangerous flare-ups. Too little ash, and the coals may burn too brightly and consume all the fuel before morning. Too much ash, and the coals may be smothered completely, requiring the difficult and time-consuming process of starting a new fire from scratch. The fire banking process represents one of the fundamental skills of medieval household management, essential for maintaining the heat source that makes comfortable life possible. The technique has been refined over countless generations of practice, and William performs it with the unconscious competence that comes from thousands of repetitions over the years of his adult life. Margaret begins to set aside the grain that will be needed for tomorrow's morning pottage, measuring out portions that will provide adequate nutrition for the family while carefully managing their stored supplies. This seemingly simple task actually requires considerable planning and calculation, as she must balance the family's immediate nutritional needs against the requirement to make their stored grain last until the next harvest. The grain storage and management system represents one of the most critical aspects of medieval household economy. Families must store enough grain to last through the entire year, from one harvest to the next, while also setting aside seed for the following year's planting. This requires careful calculation of consumption rates, accurate assessment of storage conditions, and constant vigilance to prevent spoilage from moisture, pests, or other problems. Margaret also ensures that the cottage is properly secured for the night, checking that the door is firmly barred and that any valuable items are stored safely away from potential threats. Medieval security measures are simple but effective, relying primarily on strong construction, careful concealment of valuables, and the mutual vigilance of community members who watch out for each other's welfare. Thomas and Mary help their parents with the various small tasks that prepare the cottage for night. They organize tools and materials, clean and store cooking utensils, and arrange clothing and personal items so they can be easily found in the morning's dim light. These habits of organization and preparation reflect the understanding that efficiency in daily life depends on thoughtful planning and systematic approach to routine tasks. The evening cleanup process also serves educational purposes, teaching children the importance of caring for possessions and maintaining orderly living spaces. In a world where material goods are expensive and difficult to replace, learning to treat belongings with respect and care is essential for long-term prosperity and security. Edward receives help from his parents to wash and prepare for sleep, though medieval bedtime routines are much simpler than modern equivalents. There are no elaborate hygiene rituals to perform, no complex preparations required. The simple act of washing hands and face with cold water drawn from the bucket that Thomas filled at the village well provides adequate preparation for sleep in this simpler time. The washing process is brief but thorough, serving both practical hygiene needs and symbolic purposes that mark the transition from day to night. The cold water is refreshing and helps clear away the accumulated fatigue of the day's activities, while the ritual aspect of the washing helps signal to mind and body that it is time to prepare for rest. As the final preparations for sleep are completed, the family settles onto their simple beds arranged around the banked fire. Their sleeping arrangements are communal by necessity and choice, straw mattresses covered with woolen blankets and animal skins, positioned to take advantage of the warmth radiating from the carefully tended coals. Privacy as modern people understand it does not exist in the single-room cottage, but this communal sleeping arrangement provides numerous benefits that more than compensate for the lack of individual space. Family members can share body heat during cold nights, provide mutual protection against potential dangers, and maintain the close emotional bonds that come from constant proximity and shared experience. The beds themselves are simple but functional, designed to provide adequate comfort while making efficient use of available materials and space. The straw mattresses are thick enough to provide cushioning against the hard floor, while the woolen blankets and animal skins offer warmth and protection against drafts that might penetrate the cottage walls. As the family settles into their beds, the cottage grows quiet except for the soft sounds of breathing and the occasional settling of the cooling fire. Outside, the village has become almost completely silent, with only the distant sounds of wind in the trees and the gentle movement of animals in their shelters breaking the profound peace of the medieval night. The darkness outside is absolute in a way that modern people rarely experience. There are no streetlights, no illuminated signs, no artificial sources of light to compete with the natural brilliance of stars and moon. The night sky blazes with countless points of light, creating a canopy of beauty and wonder that connects the sleeping village to the vast cosmos beyond. This darkness is not frightening but comforting, providing the kind of deep, natural rest that the human body and mind require for optimal health and function. The absence of artificial stimulation allows consciousness to fade gradually and naturally, following rhythms that have governed human sleep patterns since the beginning of time. As they lie in the darkness listening to the wind in the thatch and the distant sounds of the village settling for the night, there is a profound sense of completion and satisfaction that settles over the family like a gentle blanket. The day's work has been accomplished according to plan. Each family member has contributed according to their abilities and responsibilities, and the ongoing projects that sustain their lives have been advanced another step toward completion. William's thoughts turn to the coming days and the work that lies ahead. The plowing must be finished within the next few days, before the optimal timing window for spring planting closes and seasonal weather patterns make field work more difficult or impossible. Then will come the careful, demanding work of planting itself, with precise attention to timing, spacing, and technique that will determine the success or failure of this year's crop. He envisions the completed field with neat rows of green shoots emerging from the carefully prepared soil, growing steadily toward the harvest that will provide food and security for his family and community. This vision brings deep satisfaction, representing the successful completion of another cycle in the endless round of agricultural activities that sustains rural life. William also thinks about his family and their future with the quiet contentment of a man who has provided well for those who depend on him. Thomas is developing into a capable young man who will soon be ready for the full responsibilities of adult life, including marriage, household management, and the complex skills needed for successful farming. Mary is mastering the intricate knowledge of household management that will make her a valuable wife and competent mother. Edward is learning the fundamental skills and attitudes that will serve as the foundation for whatever path his life may take. These thoughts are peaceful and optimistic, reflecting the security that comes from knowing one's place and purpose in the world. The challenges and uncertainties that lie ahead seem manageable because they are the same kinds of challenges that families have always faced, and the solutions are known through generations of accumulated experience and wisdom. Margaret's thoughts focus on the immediate concerns of household management and family welfare, but also on the longer-term planning that ensures her family's continued prosperity and security. Tomorrow will bring continuation of the seasonal tasks that maintain their livelihood: garden work, food preservation, textile production, and the countless small activities that keep a medieval household functioning smoothly. She thinks about the various preservation projects that need attention in the coming weeks, the garden plants that will require care and cultivation, the textile work that must be completed to provide adequate clothing and household linens for the family. Each of these activities requires careful timing and sustained attention, and Margaret takes satisfaction in her ability to coordinate and manage these complex, overlapping responsibilities. Margaret also reflects on her children with the deep satisfaction of a mother who sees them growing and learning successfully. Each day brings new evidence of their developing competence and understanding, and she takes pride in the knowledge and skills she has been able to transmit to them. The investment of time and patience required for this education will pay dividends throughout their lives, enabling them to build successful households and contribute meaningfully to their community. Thomas's thoughts as he settles into sleep reflect his growing sense of adult competence and responsibility. The day's work has shown him once again that he is mastering the skills he will need to support a family and contribute meaningfully to community life. His confidence grows daily, and he looks forward to the time when he will be recognized as a full member of the adult community with all the rights and responsibilities that such recognition entails. He thinks about the various skills he is developing and the knowledge he is accumulating through daily practice and patient instruction. Each day brings new understanding of the complex factors that influence agricultural success, and Thomas feels increasingly capable of making the independent judgments that farming requires. Mary's thoughts center on the various projects and responsibilities that fill her days, and she feels deep satisfaction in her developing skills and growing understanding of household management. She envisions the household she will eventually manage, the garden she will tend, the children she will raise and educate. These dreams are not empty fantasies but realistic plans based on the solid education she is receiving and the opportunities that will be available to her as an adult woman in her community. She thinks about the conversations she has had with her mother throughout the day, processing the advice and wisdom that will guide her through the challenges and opportunities of adult life. The knowledge she is gaining about relationships, resource management, and the complex skills needed for successful household management will serve as the foundation for her future happiness and security. Edward's young mind wanders over the day's discoveries and experiences, processing the constant stream of new information that fills a child's world with wonder and possibility. His dreams will likely be filled with the magical possibilities of a world that still seems unlimited in its potential for discovery and adventure. As sleep gradually claims each member of the family, their breathing becomes deeper and more regular, and the cottage grows quiet except for the gentle sounds of peaceful rest. The fire burns lower, its glow becoming softer and warmer, creating an atmosphere of perfect tranquility and security. Outside, the village sleeps under a canopy of stars that shine with brilliant clarity in the unpolluted darkness of the medieval night. The air is clean and sweet, filled with the sense of growing things and the healthy smell of earth and water. This is a world in harmony with natural systems where human activity works with rather than against the forces that sustain all life. The sleep that comes to this family is deep and natural, unmarked by the stress and anxiety that often characterize modern rest. Their bodies are tired from honest physical labor, their minds are at peace with the day's accomplishments, and their spirits are nourished by the knowledge that they have contributed meaningfully to something larger than themselves. The ongoing life of their community and the eternal cycles that connect all living things. In this simple cottage, in this small village, in this forgotten corner of medieval England, life continues according to patterns that have endured for centuries and will endure for centuries more. The daily round of work and rest, of planting and harvest, of birth and growth and renewal, connects these people to their ancestors and their descendants in an unbroken chain of human experience that stretches back to the beginning of agricultural civilization. There is profound wisdom in this way of life, wisdom about the proper relationship between human needs and natural systems, about the importance of community cooperation and mutual support, about finding meaning and satisfaction in simple work well done. It is wisdom that the modern world has largely forgotten in its pursuit of speed, efficiency, and endless growth, but it remains available to those who seek it in the quiet rhythms of natural life. Sweet dreams to William and Margaret, to Thomas and Mary and little Edward, and to all the countless families throughout history who have found contentment in lives of honest labor and simple virtue. May their peaceful rest remind us that true happiness requires neither complexity nor wealth, but rather the wisdom to appreciate what we have and to find our proper place in the great web of relationships that sustains all life. In the gentle darkness of their cottage, surrounded by the love of family and the security of meaningful work accomplished, they sleep the deep sleep of those who live in harmony with natural rhythms and find purpose in serving something greater than themselves. Their dreams are peaceful, their rest is restorative, and tomorrow will bring another day of the simple, sustainable life that has nourished human communities since the beginning of time. And so we leave this medieval family to their well-earned rest, carrying with us the memory of their quiet wisdom and the example of their contented lives. In their simple daily routine, we find reminders of what truly matters: family, community, meaningful work, and the deep satisfaction that comes from living in harmony with the rhythms of the natural world that sustains us all. The night deepens around their cottage, and peace settles over the sleeping village like a gentle blessing. In dreams, the eternal cycle continues, and tomorrow will bring another day of purposeful labor, family love, and the quiet contentment that comes from lives lived simply but meaningfully, in harmony with the ancient patterns that have sustained human communities through all the ages of the world.